Hey guys, how's it going? I don't know what that was, but we are today doing another Ask the Experts video. We are focusing on Ackie Monitors today, red or yellow, whatever you prefer. I have 5 reputable breeders who've been doing it for, I think, at a minimum 5+ years, and that's just breeding as a hobby way longer. And we're gonna hear some tips from them, basically similar questions from the Tegu video, the first Ask the Experts video. Plug that in somewhere here, and we'll just get some advice from them, hear what they have to say. I've been doing this not nearly as long as a lot of other people, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of great advice out there, even if I was, doing this for 50 years or something ridiculous, So I want to get their voices in, I want to get the voices in of people who grind every day doing this stuff. So that's why I'm doing this series. I think it's super important. Plus, we should give recognition to people, who are doing this grind and, don't maybe get as much appreciation as they should. Not saying that they don't, but you know what I mean. Anyway, guys, let's get to it. We'll start with Jeff Easter, who also is, I think, one of the 2 admins for the Ackie Monitors Facebook group, which I'll plug in down below. That's a great place if you have an Ackie to join up on and talk. So let's get to it. We'll talk about some of the questions I asked him and some of his feedback. To give a little bit of background on Jeff's experience, he's been working with reptiles for over 25 years, and in the last 5-ish years been starting to breed Ackies. So that's really cool, and he's definitely continuing to breed them further. Jeff is also the owner of GIS Herps, so check the description below if you want to see his stuff. He's got Tegus, monitors, just a bunch of stuff, so I definitely recommend checking him out. Alright, so before reading the comments, I just want to mention that he sent me one of the care guides he's done. I'm going to throw that in the description below if you want to see what his care guide is for Ackies. I've done one in the past, but I would definitely check his out. He probably has some things I might have missed or whatever, or maybe he does things differently, so go check that out. Anyway, so the first question I asked him was, and I did this again in the Tegu thing, do you have any tips and tricks for Ackies that maybe most owners do not consider? One of the best things I would suggest to any person who wants a reptile or amphibian of any sort is to get a temp gun. They're cheap and the best and first thing you should get. Temperatures are the most important thing for your animal. So this is sort of just in general, but I have a temp gun myself. I've used it a couple times in my videos. I know I used it in my Dubia Roach video. And I've also done a video on the stuff I use. I don't know what I called it, but I'll plug that in. And I think it was in there too. And I definitely recommend and agree with him of getting a temp gun. It's good because you're not going to get a good, accurate basking temp measurement with an ambient measurement, if you get what I mean. You want a temp gun for that. Specifically, if you can get the back of the reptile, if they've been sitting there for a little bit, then you know what the temperature is on their back. So yeah, measuring basking spot, you need a temp gun. It's necessary. So I 100% agree with that. Second question I asked him, what is the most important when considering an Ackie as a pet? So he says, when considering an Ackie or any pet, ask yourself, what do you expect from your animal? With monitors, it's all about mutual trust, and that's just a start. Can you afford all aspects of having and keeping that animal? The initial buy-in is a drop in the bucket. That's quite a statement. They need proper housing and food and can live 20+ years. When considering what animals to buy, all things being the same with housing and feeding, remember, like most things, you get what you pay for, hopefully. Get the Ackie you want to look at for the foreseeable future. He likes eye candy, so, he likes the good stuff. Myself, I'm not big on morphs, but we won't get into that. But basically, yeah, what he's saying is very important, and I agree with that. It's, I can't even speak enough to that. I've been grinding at the vet with a lot of my reptiles lately, so I think what he's saying here is super important. It's hands down probably, number one, the thing that leads to a lot of rehomes. People don't understand that the initial cost is really just a fraction of what, their cost is going to be over their lifetime. Besides, especially if you're doing DIY or actually even buying an enclosure. Enclosures are expensive for good size, you know what I'm talking about? If I wanted to buy the enclosures I have for my Ackies, that probably would have been double what I spent. I think I spent around like $500, but I honestly don't remember. So there's that. There's putting substrate in, you know, all that stuff. It all adds up. You really got to consider all that, and a lot of people don't. The last question I asked Jeff was, lastly, what is something you see done wrong in regards to Ackie husbandry that people should know about? Jeff says, something I have a pet peeve about with Ackies is people who keep them on unsuitable substrate. There are no lizards in paper talistan. So I think, you know, not 100%, just gonna go out on a limb here, is he's referring to paper towels as substrate. Anyway, they don't live on tiles scattered around the outback. A simple mix of sand and soil is what we use for all our lizards, and that's what I use too. Don't overthink it. If you have your temps dialed in properly, they'll be just fine on sand and soil. Ackies especially are pretty hard to impact, I would say, from my experience. But to continue, one substrate additive many keepers use we stay clear of, that is coconut coir. It holds humidity great, but it can be tragically dangerous. Eco Earth, one form of it, is commonly available at pet stores. Once mixed up, you will see horsehair-like strands in it. These are not unlike the antenna of prey offered to your Ackies. These can be particularly dangerous for babies who are hunting their prey on the ground. The strands are indigestible and become a blockage and can kill your new pet. I had this happen right in front of me while I watched, helpless. Baby went from cricket assassin to dead in 2 days. Coconut coir can be used if meticulously sifted to get those strands out. Otherwise, I find it easier to avoid that stuff. My 2 cents. A lot of important stuff here. Substrate is a very debated topic just in general in the reptile hobby. Currently in, you know, different lizard, but my bearded dragon, I have that on tiles. But as, you know, I sort of continued, I've been really regretting that decision. I mean, I don't regret it. I don't think it's bad currently, but I think it would have been better to put my bearded dragon on substrate. I think that's more natural, and I think it's a little overhyped. But way different topic. Alright, next up, we have John Adragna Jr. Sorry if I pronounce your last name. I spent a lot longer than you would think trying to think about how to pronounce it. Just want to throw that out there. But anyway, first question I asked him, again, any good tips and tricks you have for Ackies that maybe most owners do not consider? He says, I think most reptile people getting into Ackies think it's a desert lizard. I find keeping them with higher humidity, not necessarily wet, will benefit their health. Now, this has been a topic that has been quite discussed for me recently, talking about Ackie humidity requirements. If you go ahead and you look at, you know, where they're native to in Australia, the humidity levels are no lower than like 55-ish%, but in captivity, we usually talk about doing at least 70. So there's been a lot of argument about, do they really need more than usual humidity and such? And my overall response from observation and just hearing from other people is, yeah, they do want higher humidity in their substrate. Basically, high humidity in their substrate allows for better shedding and easier burrow making. So the byproduct of that is basically, since you're in sort of this enclosure that could be very well sealed, is that the air temperature is also going to be a little bit higher humidity than normal. So that's sort of my mindset of that. I'm not saying that's maybe what this other John, we have the same name, this other John thinks, but that's, you know, that's my understanding. Next question. What is most important when considering an Ackie as a pet? Basically, he says, considering an Ackie as a pet once you are able to sex your Ackie, providing additional nesting or deeper substrate for females would promote a smooth and timely nesting versus a situation where she becomes gravid and the keeper is unaware, so the lizard dumps out very stressful or becomes egg-bound, often a death sentence. And you know I've been struggling with eggs in one of my Ackies pretty recently. I do have 2 feet of depth for my substrate, which is more than enough. Sometimes, you know, it's unavoidable, but, you know, good stuff there. Last question I asked him, what is something you see done wrong in regards to Ackie husbandry that people should know about? not feeding enough, not supplementing with calcium, not allowing them to climb or use the whole cage. I make the walls climbable, attach cork tubes to the walls, add so much more dimension. They'll use the entire cage if you let them. And that's why, you know, a lot of people will say stick them in a 4x2x2, and even to me that's small. I think honestly, even my, I think it's 6x3.5x4, I even think that should be the minimum. They use all of that space quite easily, and I definitely do want to add some cork to the walls. I do agree that that would be a good benefit for them. John also has a website. He has a patent for this incubation system that I think you should check out, so I'll plug that in the description. Next up is another Jonathan Mendoza. Starting out with him, I asked him any good tips and tricks, like I have the others, that most owners do not know about or do not consider. So he says some good tips that I feel like most people don't consider when keeping Ackies is having good temperature gradient and multiple levels of basking, especially when keeping several animals together. I see a lot of people stuck on this 120 to 130 as the max basking temp, when in reality going higher is perfectly fine as long as you give them the proper gradient and use proper bulbs. I have areas in my enclosures that the surface temperatures reach as high as 165 degrees Fahrenheit, which the animals do use in and out throughout the day. But they also have areas in the cage as low as the mid-70s and can pretty much pick and choose at what temp they're comfortable at. Having multiple basking spots or layers to your one site is also crucial in my opinion, since it allows animals to pick and choose like I said. But multiple animals don't have to fight over one spot, which can and does happen sometimes depending on the animals. So yeah, I agree. I mean, it really, so one of the biggest observations about temperature is you should see how long your animal spends under the basking area. If it's a very long time, you maybe want to crank it up a little bit. And I can definitely say that my safe area I see for my Ackies is about 140 to 150. That's where I see them not bask too long. Ackies actually do a lot of quick basks where they'll bask, they'll go away, come back, bask again, and such. So that's kind of how they go about it. I know people who do much higher than 140 to 150, and that works perfectly fine. Basically, it's just checking out your animal, their stool production, and such like that. So I definitely agree. I definitely think 120 to 130 is too low. 130, I would almost say that's the lowest possible, but even that's a little low in my opinion. But hey, I don't want to speak for something I don't know too much about. Next question. What is most important when considering an Ackie as a pet? He says, what is most important when considering them as a pet is their activity levels and diet. They are very busy animals when kept right and given the proper temps. And having a proper size enclosure which is furnished right is definitely a must. They also have a diet like no other. I've seen some of my animals put down 30 to 50 crickets plus several rodents in a single sitting. So be prepared to handle the food load these animals require, especially during breeding season, is something a person really needs to consider first before acquiring one as a pet. Some good stuff there. They do have a great appetite and are very busy animals, I agree. Last question. What is something you see done wrong in regards to Ackie husbandry that people should know about? He goes on to say, what I see done wrong a lot is people really not giving them a full range in their enclosures. What I mean by that is they're not offering places to climb. You'll see people with huge elaborate enclosures that fail to utilize the entire top of the enclosures with branches, and I just find it to be a waste. Like I touched on before, these are very active animals and will use every ounce of space you provide them, including height. I have an enclosure that are 3 feet in height, and I see my animals at the very top often. And again, I completely agree with that. I do want to actually use more vertical space myself in the actual walls, which is why I said I want to put cork on them. So we'll figure that out eventually in a future video. To give a little bit of background to Jonathan, he's been keeping Ackies for about 11 years now, both reds and yellows, and breeding them the last 3 years. I have some pictures, which you'll probably already be seeing, that he sent me of some nice, beautiful Ackies. So take a look at them for a couple seconds, and we'll move on to our next person. Next, we have some comments from Anthony Sainz. Again, any good tips and tricks you have for Ackies that maybe most owners do not consider? He says, Ackies are neat, but like all Aussie species, they need it hot and have a fast metabolism. The second question, what is most important when considering an Ackie as a pet? He goes to say, they like to burrow and love to climb. Biggest mistake I see is people housing them in a small enclosure and low heat and not feeding often. Again, I think this has been a very reoccurring pattern, so I think this is very good information. You can see where a lot of experienced people see things done wrong, so definitely a trend. Last question, what is something you see done wrong in regards to Ackie husbandry that people should know about? He says, Ackies can breed at a fairly young age, and I see this a lot. People breeding them young and early, which can mess them up in the long run, if not fully matured. This is definitely a different response for this, and I like this, because this is something I've only heard about once before. And I think it's very important that, there are people out there, I guess for the money or something, for something obviously not for the animal, and, really pump them full of stuff like food and just really gut-loaded items. I'm not really sure how to put it, but I think you know what I mean. To get them sexually mature before they're kind of ready, so they can start using them in breeding projects. So that's a very good comment. I really appreciate that. To give some context to Anthony's background, he's been keeping Ackie Monitors for about 10 years now, and basically has been breeding them. He has his own reptile page on Facebook for his business, Reptiles by Sainz, so go check that out. That will be in the description. Last but not least, we have SimHatch. SimHatch will give us some more detailed comments and a little bit more elaborate on feeding non-whole prey items. So let's get to it. Any good tips and tricks you have for Ackies that maybe most owners do not consider? He says Ackie care is very straightforward. They require high heat with a basking spot of 150 or so, ambient temps in the low 80s to high 90s. They do like to climb, so provide as much surface area as possible. Usable space on the walls, not just sticks in the middle of the cage. They have hearty appetites and consume pretty much anything offered, from insects to hard-boiled eggs and ground turkey. So some good stuff there. As you can see, 150 is probably the close. I'd probably go up to 155 when a new light gets put in, so that's kind of my high end. But you can see how diverse sort of temperature range is for Ackies, I guess, and how, I guess, sort of debated it is. Next question, what is the most important when considering an Ackie as a pet? He goes on to say the most important about Ackies, besides temps, is to make sure you have enough stimuli in the cage and that you're constantly moving things around to avoid monotonous lifestyle. They are very intelligent animals for being reptilian. They have problem-solving skills, and keeping that stimuli around the cage will help maintain their cognitive tendencies on high alert. Definitely agree. They're very curious animals. In taming them, I found it very successful to have them come to you and just fiddle around in their enclosure, and they'll eventually seek you out. That's how curious they are. So I definitely agree with that. Last question. What is something you see done wrong in regards to Ackie husbandry that people should know about? The biggest mistake I see people make with these wonderful animals is throwing them in a cage with a screen top and a light fixture 10 inches away from the animal. It will never metabolize food properly or keep adequate operating temperatures. Agreed. And I think that just, again, speaks to having a very large enclosure with proper heating and stuff like that, and doing your research. So definitely, again, continuing with that trend, and not wanting to stick them in a small little enclosure. Now, before talking about the whole prey items, a little background on Sim. He's been breeding Ackies as a company since 2009 and has been a hobbyist of Ackies since 2005, so for quite a long time. Now to talk about whole prey items, and I deliberately asked this because, first of all, he said, if you have anything else, feel free to ask me, and I know he mentioned hard-boiled eggs and turkey. One of the things that was told to me very adamantly when I first started was to only feed whole prey items. And I haven't really heard a lot from the other side in terms of, people who feed non-whole prey items. So I asked him basically that, do you have an argument for that, sort of like that. So he said, feeding non-whole prey items is something that should be heavily taken into consideration. Insects alone won't satisfy such a complex metabolic and reproductive system. They can't get their nutrients and then some with boiled eggs, turkey, and insects to great degree with supplementation. This diet is key to supporting gravid females and fast-growing young animals. So that's what he has to say about that. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Sorry it was quite a long video, but maybe I just like hearing myself talk, but I thought everything in it meant a lot and was good to keep in. So anyway, guys, video later this week. I'm going home, but I think my girlfriend's going to do a little special video, so stay tuned for that. and I'll see you guys then. Thanks for watching, subscribe, like, and comment. See ya.